Good morning, folks. It is 9 a.m. on March 10th. It's unbelievable that it's already March. This is the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. This is our regularly weekly scheduled meeting. We start up at 9 a.m. We're giving everybody a chance to Zoom into our meeting. We've got 32 participants so far and climbing, which is good. While folks Zoom in, let's go ahead and get the roll call. Hearings Officer Amaro.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Bogue?
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Here.
Commissioner McGowan?
Here.
Commissioner Mesner?
Here.
Commissioner Nanjapa?
Here.
Commissioner Hackett? Commissioner Robbins?
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 6 out of 7 commissioners present.
Excellent. And I was informed by Commissioner Hackett that he's not able to make the meeting today, so he's excused, and we do have a quorum, so we'll be able to move forward with our daily business. We start each, well, sometimes we start with general public comment, and that's what we're doing today. We have 6 members from the public that signed up. We appreciate folks signing up ahead of time so that we're able to collect them and find them and bring them to the panel. I would also note that we do appreciate written public comment, and we received 1 written public comment from Megan Wilder. Thank you, Ms. Wilder, for providing your public comment. We've all read that and appreciate your perspective. And with that, Hearings Manager Amaro, do we have any of the folks that signed up, starting with Brent Goodlett?
I will promote him right now.
Hello, Mr. Goodlett. We can see you. Glad to have you with us. As with all members of the public, you have 3 minutes in which to make your statement to us, and we look forward to hearing from you.
All right, thank you. And fair warning, I may go a minute over because I have a couple of acknowledgements, but let's just go into it. Hello, my name is Brent Goodlett, and I'm speaking before you today as a concerned member of the public, as an organizer of the millennial generation, as a public servant of the people of Colorado, and as an advocate against the climate crisis. To the new members of the commission, welcome. Thank you for this public service, and may your heart guide you to do what is right and what is just as you make decisions that impact the lives and livelihoods of Coloradans for generations to come. Before I go on, I have a couple of acknowledgements. First, let me acknowledge with deep respect the indigenous stewards of this land, past, present, and future, that we gather here today on unceded lands that are the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Ute, Cheyenne, Arapaho, Apache, Comanche, and Kiowa nations and peoples. Second, I must acknowledge the anniversary of this COVID pandemic, another crisis of inequality that disproportionately affects our Black, Brown, Indigenous, and people of color, with a national death toll in excess of 527,000 lives lost in a single year to this terrible pandemic. We mustn't go numb to the pain and suffering of others, lest we risk losing a part of ourselves and our collective humanity. So with that out of the way now, let me get to the topic that I'm actually here to speak about today, and that is about cumulative impact, as in the cumulative impact of oil and gas development stipulated by SB 181, directing the COGCC rulemaking to consider cumulative impacts of fossil fuel development on public health, safety, welfare, the environment, the wildlife across Colorado. A mighty task for such a small group of servants, but one that absolutely must be successful. Now, my views of cumulative impact are quite simple, though far from simplistic, as they are well-reasoned, supported by the best available science from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which says we must, here in Colorado and around the globe, immediately halt all new fossil fuel development and instead use what remains of a meager carbon budget to build out a clean energy economy that will sustain our people far into the future. This includes vast investments in wind, solar, energy storage, direct air carbon capture, carbon utilization, and sequestration technologies that have yet to be invented. We have no other choice. We must reckon with the cumulative impact of our emissions to date, and we must do so while simultaneously transforming the rest of our society and industries to net zero emissions. With zero emissions as the target, the accounting really is that simple. All emissions must stop. Of course, these views may seem radical to some, but let me assure you, I share them with more than just the climate scientists and experts of the IPCC. Indeed, I share these views with the vast majority of my fellow millennials, now the largest voting bloc in America, and the last generation with any meaningful chance to act before humanity is locked into a climate pathway of no return, to a hothouse Earth the likes of which no human has ever experienced, so far beyond the climate of the Holocene that vast swaths of the Earth's surface may become uninhabitable, and what remains of our ecosystems and habitats will be so damaged from the scale and pace of warming that they may become incapable of supporting a modern human society. If you ask me, that's a radical view of the future that we should all reject. That is a future that the COGCC must promulgate rules to prevent, rules that account for the cumulative impact of fossil fuel development, excuse me, on everything that we hold dear. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodlett. We appreciate you being with us and providing this perspective. Christy Douglas is next.
Hello, am I unmuted?
You are, Ms. Douglas. We can hear you.
All right. Could I ask that Steve go ahead of me, because he has to go back to work, otherwise he won't be able to testify today.
That's fine.
And then I'll go after him. Would that be all right?
Yes, that's fine. We recognize
All
Steve
right.
Douglas.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Just keep it short. The people have a right to clean air, pure water, and the preservation of natural and scenic and historic aesthetic value of the environment. Colorado public natural resources are the common property of all people, including generations yet to come. And as trustees of the resources, the Commonwealth shall conserve, maintain, and then for the benefit for all people. So just to clarify, nothing yet has been approved yet in Commerce City. And right now, this community is a bedroom community. We lack retail because of industry, and we're trying to turn things around and give Commerce City a different image. We have the Rocky Mountain Wildlife Refuge. That's a center of our city and has a huge impact of what happened on that land. And we do not want to disturb that at all. No drilling near or by the arsenal. We do not want to put people's health and safety at harm. So I please use strict guidance when this comes before you. Hopefully it doesn't come past Commerce City as far as the council members there, but I'm not holding my breath. But I'm asking you as the commissioners to protect the safety, health, and welfare of all citizens. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Ms. Douglas, if you'd like to go now.
Oh, certainly, thank you. And thanks for letting Steve do that. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Christy Douglas. I live in Commerce City, Adams County, and I come to you as an impacted citizen. I'm a mother of 5, grandmother of 5 fantastic grandchildren. I'm also a wife, and an active member of my community. So this morning, I would like to read to you an excerpt from a column that came out in the Philadelphia Inquirer by Will Bunch, who is a columnist for that paper. The title is, "A New Study Shows Toxic Chemical Exposure for Pennsylvanians Living Near Fracking Sites." Whatever else happens in 2021, we should remember that this is the year that the great political debate over fracking for oil and natural gas has ended, at least here in the critical state of Pennsylvania. On one hand, there's mounting evidence that the frenzy for an unconventional gas drilling under the Marcellus Shale has failed to produce any lasting job boom or the tax revenue its backers promised. On the other hand, scientists have more proof that fracking has polluted the air and water of nearby residents, as worries about the health impacts are spiking. Is it really a debate when both hands are on the same side? Over the last decade, numerous studies have set off alarm bells about fracking in the environment in the scenic rural corners of Pennsylvania where drilling took root. But few have been as concerning as a recent investigation by Environmental Health News, EHN. Admittedly, its sample size was small, but 5 families who lived close to fracking sites in the southwest corner of the Commonwealth agreed to allow the news org to test their urine samples, and the results were arguably worse than expected. EHN reported that biomarkers for hazardous and possibly carcinogenic chemicals linked to the fracking process were extremely high in these families. For example, one 9-year-old boy who lived in close proximity to the fracking well had 91 times the level of an average American for toluene, a chemical that can cause severe neurological harm. The study, which also found chemical pollution in the air and water near the family's home, found that the families who lived closer to drilling pads had higher levels of chemicals such as 1,2,3-time-thibenzene, 2-hepatone, and naphthalene, I'm not a scientist, sorry, than those who lived a bit farther away. The substances caused an array of health problems and increased cancer risk. And the article goes on. I would love to continue reading, but I just want you to know that we should look to see what's happened in other places, and listening to the public comments as of recent, with all the people coming in from Erie and Boulder, so on and so forth. I don't want to be subjected to what they're having to deal with now. Now, my husband said that there hasn't been anything approved here in the city of Commerce City as of yet, but the county approved the Edmondson site. And our citizens here in Outlook in Commerce City are going to be subjected to being fracked right near their residences. And unfortunately, those people were clueless. They had no idea what was going on. And now they're in a frenzy because they've realized what's happening. And I know that you all, your experience is not to be on the receipt end of this, what I call a travesty, but you have no idea what it's like to be on this end. And you've got to take that into consideration. I fought Ivy, and now I'm going to fight Edmondson. I fought Ivy for 5 years, and you still approved it. And the people there are going through the same thing. They're going nuts because they don't know what to do about it, because now they realize that it's too late. So please consider us as stakeholders. We have a bigger stakehold in this matter than any of the companies that are trying to drill here. And I'm going to tell you that they do not operate in the open. They are deceptive. They operate in the shadows.
Ms. Douglas,
and they
you're
do
well over
anything they
time.
can to get in here. So thank you for allowing me the extra time. I'm sorry to be emotional about this, but I am here to protect my community, and I want you to hear me loud and clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Douglas. If you want to provide us with a link to the article that you read, we'd all like to see that, so we appreciate that. I've tried to Google it while you were talking, and I was not able to find it, but if you're able to send that to us, we'd appreciate it. Thank you very much. We now move to Heidi Leithwood. Ms. Leithwood, you're still on mute.
Hi, thank you for the commission hearing us today. I'm feeling quite emotional after Brent Goodlet's comment, so I'll do my best, but I want to thank Brent for his comments, for putting this in the bigger perspective, and for the land acknowledgement. And that I'm a mother of millennials, and that's why I'm here. I've completely turned my life upside down to fight for them and their future. Last week in the COGCC meeting, I heard Director Will Tour say, excuse me.
It's okay, Ms. Leithwood. I've turned the timer off while you collect yourself so that we give you your full
Thanks.
time.
I appreciate that. Okay. I heard Director Will Tour say that our mandated goal is to bring emissions down to near zero. And I want to thank the commissioners for their questions and for being interested in their role and how they can make that happen. I also applaud you for doing aerial methane emissions measurements, and I hope that you will do this annually as the presenter recommended. Excuse me. This method of measuring methane is what the latest science recommends for a full picture, as I'm sure that you know. There is also new data about a more accurate method of estimating leaks and impacts. 350 Colorado has a new report based on this research that I will drop in the chat if that's okay. It is a look, thank you. It is a look at recomputing the estimates for Colorado's emissions based on the latest studies. I also ask that you require and enforce continuous monitoring as is now required by law. As a fracking state, we also impact frontline communities globally. We must recognize and take responsibility not only for the emissions caused by the production process of the oil and gas and coal in our state, but for the burning of it here and beyond our borders. Our reduction plan must include this. Common sense and ethics dictate this. Excuse me. From the peer-reviewed journal about the latest studies about methane, and that this is one of the researchers referenced in the 350 report, I'd like to quote his study. Shale gas production in North America over the past decade may have contributed more than half of all the increased emissions from fossil fuels globally, and approximately 1/3 of total increased emissions from all sources globally over the past decade. I'm going to put that study in the chat too, if that's all right. A lot of emissions come from wells that are no longer producing, whether or not they are properly plugged. But I really have a big concern about orphaned wells. Companies should not be allowed permits if it is not certain that they can afford to adequately clean up. So I hope that you will pass an adequate per well amount. Between 2015 and 2020, Colorado had the second highest number of oil and gas bankruptcies behind Texas. Colorado oil and gas companies have a total of over $500 million in debt in Colorado. I'm here as a member of 350. I don't know if I've said that yet. And 350 is also pushing on another front for assistance to oil and gas workers as part of a just transition. You can help with that by raising assurances so that companies that are not economically viable are not allowed to continue activities that will suddenly leave their workers without a job and with no time to plan. And I just want to end by saying, I totally agree with Brent Goodlet, and I feel ridiculous here asking for little things, but I know that the little things are what must add up to help us address the bigger picture. And I really urge you to do not just what you have to do under the law, but everything that you can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leithwood. If you want to provide that information to us in the chat, that would be great. And that way we'll have access to it.
Thank you.
We now have Kate Christensen.
Mr. Chair, I cannot find Kate, but if she might be one of the 2 phone numbers, if she can raise her hand and we can let her in.
Okay, let's go ahead and move to Janice Hallowell then while we wait for Ms. Christensen to find us.
It is the same situation with Janice.
Oh, okay,
Yes, sorry about that.
not a problem.
Okay, I see one raised hand. Deborah McNamara. I hope this is.
Oh, sorry.
Ms. McNamara, are you?
This is
Under-
Kate Christensen. I'm sorry.
Wait.
Sometimes we share a Zoom account at work, and I didn't have the opportunity, the format to change my name, but
Okay.
I don't know if I can rename now, but I am Kate Christensen.
I'll
It's
can't
okay,
rename
name
we'll
so you guys call
take
me.
you as Kate
Oh, I'm
and we'll
sorry.
look forward to hearing from you. Did we lose Kate? Oh, here she comes again. You're muted.
I don't know
Okay.
what happened. I'll leave it as Deb. I'm Kate Christensen. Sorry, guys. I was trying to change my name when something happened. I don't want to mess with it again. Thank you for taking the time to hear my comments. I tried to comment last week, but with my other job, the scheduling and the presentation, the scheduling didn't work out. But there's a couple things I wanted to comment on. One was, I don't want to reiterate what everyone else said. I appreciate all the comments before and the report that Heidi highlighted. I'm also with 350.org. I've emailed that report to all the commissioners as well, and I appreciate those who have responded and those who have responded about our virtual fracking tour. I think it's going to be really important because I was one of the people who worked on SB 181. I was down at the Capitol for like 12 hours at a time, testifying, trying to get that passed 2 years ago. I was there when the oil and gas companies just unloaded busloads of workers to show up, who were on the clock, who were getting transportation, who were getting meals. And those of us who were proponents of SB 181 were there on our own dime, on our own transportation, figuring out childcare and time off work to participate in that legislation. And we were the ones who stayed. At 5 o'clock, all the oil and gas workers were gone, but we were the ones who stayed to testify to midnight. The times I testified, I was there till midnight, fighting for protection for our neighborhoods. And we thought we did something. And I understand that with the whole retooling of the COGCC, it feels, probably from your guys' perspective too, that something has changed. But on the ground 2 years later, it does not feel like anything has changed. Like last 2 weekends ago, I rode my bike out to the Collier Hill site because I live in Lafayette, it's super close to Erie. And it's deja vu. And I don't know the answer to what needs to happen, but something more needs to happen because health, safety, and the environment, which now is the law and has been for 2 years, you don't see it on the ground. You don't. And so one of the things that could potentially shift is in that report that 350 put together, we're calling for a 10% decrease in oil and gas activity every year for the next 10 years to get to net zero. I think including oil and gas workers in the just transition that the coal workers are a part of right now is critical in that. But I don't see any other way to reduce our emissions to a point where our planet's going to be livable. And that's where you guys come in. You can do it. You can do it. I believe in you. You can help us get there. Because right now, what's happening isn't. isn't working. It's not keeping people healthy, and it's not keeping people safe, and it's not going to give us a little planet. So thank you for the time and listening to me speak. I hope to see you guys on Monday night. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your reach outs. We appreciate it. And thank you for being with us this morning. Miss Amaro, did we find Miss Hallowell?
Ms. Hallowell is not in the meeting yet, but if she can raise her hand, she might be the other phone number that's there. And we'll let her in. I don't see it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, why don't we do this? Let's continue on with our agenda, and maybe toward the end, if Miss Hallowell shows up, just let me know, Hearings Officer Amaro, and we can take a break and come back to the final public commenter.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And so with that, we would turn to a report from Director Murphy and/or her colleagues. Good morning, Director Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners, and thank you, Coloradans who are tuned in. I have a very quick update, and then I wanted to get into a conversation about following up on the requests that we received from Erie's Mayor Carroll last week. And so with that, and then provide a brief update on that, and then turn it over to Mr. Mike Leonard to provide an update on kind of the complaint status that we heard quite a bit about last week. So first off, last week, the governor dropped by an all-staff meeting to acknowledge the work that our organization and Colorado stakeholders have poured into implementing 181. And I think one of the most important things is, we've all put so much work into it, but so much work lies before us as well. And in particular with the upcoming financial assurance rulemaking, as well as truly just working day in, day out on transitioning our organization. So it meant a lot to me. I think it meant a lot to staff, and it was a great opportunity. And it's the first time in my experience with COGCC that a governor has dropped by a staff meeting, so it meant a lot. Turning now to rulemaking updates, as I noted, we are continuing to support the mission change implementation. We're meeting with stakeholders, partners, staff. Operator trainings are going to move to a bi-weekly cadence to make sure we continue to have that ongoing and very important dialogue. March 23rd will be the next meeting. Also, as that cadence kind of slows from that really aggressive pace in January, I think we're going to look to see financial assurance conversations ramping up. I want to remind everybody who's listening that the financial assurance informational docket is open. The deadline to submit a written submittal for commissioners and to request presentation time is March 15th. So that's quickly upon us, and an important date. And we look forward to the dialogue that creates, and we'll be monitoring that conversation and evaluating how we continue the conversation about financial assurance and elevate it into new rules. Again, next week, we're going to meet on Wednesday evening to receive public comment just with COGCC. And then on Thursday, there's a joint Air Quality Control Commission, Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission joint meeting. Again, we anticipate that will be a full day of meeting. If folks want to send it for public comment at the joint meeting, it will be through Air Quality Control Commission's website, and that information will be on COGCC's website to help direct everybody to the right sign-up sheet. And with that, I would turn, if there are no questions on kind of the day-to-day pieces, I'll turn and jump into the dialogue around Erie and the requests from Mayor Carroll. Seeing none, that's great news. So, this conversation has been ongoing with our commission for a couple of weeks and a couple of months. Last week, we heard from Erie's mayor on behalf of the town and residents, several of whom had filed COGCC complaints. We wanted to provide an update on COGCC's continued coordination around compliance, safety, and response to the complaints, and also to the engagement with a number of partners on this site. Again, the location at issue, the MAJ, is actually located in unincorporated Weld County, but is very close to Erie citizens. And so again, we're engaged with all partners, the town of Erie, constituents, the operator, Occidental, CDPHE, and Weld County in regulating these oil and gas operations. Our goal is to ensure that all the protections from COGCC rules and regs and permit conditions are being satisfied, and that the operator is in compliance with those rules. So we have been working with CDPHE, and CDPHE did receive and is overseeing to some degree implementation of the operator's air emission monitoring plan on that location. Oxy voluntarily submitted the plan in advance of CDPHE's regulations, Reg 7 becoming effective. CDPHE has been and will continue to review data reports submitted by Oxy, and Oxy's plan provides CDPHE with the information necessary to ensure safe operations. In addition to providing this information to CDPHE, Oxy is also providing that information to Erie. We did hear a request for COGCC to purchase a canary and place it near the Collier School to provide real-time monitoring to the community. And I do want to acknowledge that canaries provide valuable air concentration information on a location. We're currently evaluating the request of deploying a canary to this location because we want to make sure that the canary meets the expectations of the community, i.e. near real-time information and identification of source emissions. And I also want to recognize that that would be in conjunction with, but is no substitute for, the ongoing air emissions being conducted on the actual location. We have had an initial call with the town, and I look forward to connecting with Mayor Carroll later this week as we hone in on some of those technical questions. Also, COGCC did deploy its own noise monitoring system to calibrate and validate or not Oxy's noise monitoring. Mike Leonard will present more about that shortly. The short answer is that based on our data, the operator is in compliance with COGCC rules and regulations. Again, we're committed to safe operations and regulating this location and monitoring it. We will continue to regulate oil and gas development and production to verify compliance, respond to complaints, and provide accurate and timely information around the May site. And we will be attuned to conversations around Papa Joe and Yellowhammer, and will continue to be responsive to the town, to the county, to CDPHE, and to the community. With that, I would like to turn it over to Mike to run through, and he has slides so that we can visually see a little bit more, to provide some more information about the complaints that we've received to date and what staff has found at this point in time.
Great, thank you, Director Murphy. Good morning, Mr. Leonard. Good to have you with us. If you want to introduce yourself for our stakeholders that are listening in and what your job is here, and then you can roll into your presentation.
Sure, thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Mike Leonard, the Compliance Unit Manager here at COGCC. I work with the staff, the field inspection staff that actually does sound surveys and field inspections. I have a few slides here to respond to your request, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. But this is a pretty complex issue. So if I can have slide number 2, please.
I will get those up right now, Mr. Leonard.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, I have them on my screen. I thought you had it. Oh, well.
There we go.
Thank you. Just, you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, from February 16th to March 3rd, COGCC received 16 noise complaints, 16 separate noise complaints. 11 gave addresses, and I'll explain why addresses are important here in a minute. 3 gave no addresses, and 2 were basically from the town of Erie. Of the 11 that gave addresses, 2 came from one singular address and 3 came from another singular address. Staff does want to recognize that the residents heard the activity and it just did disrupt their lives. But what we have to determine is, was it over the allowable limits set by COGCC rule? Can I have the next slide, please? I'm not going to read this whole slide and the rule, but I want to point you to the highlighted text for the takeaways. First, the allowable limit for completion operations is 65 dBc, 24 hours a day. It's a little different for DBA, but it is 65 for DBC. And second, when issues arise, to prevent an accurate measurement to be taken at a residence, COGCC can use the formula below to determine sound levels. And I'll speak more about the formula here in a bit. Next slide, please.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Just for our listening audience, can you explain the difference between DBC and DBA?
Sure. DBA is higher frequency noise, more associated with speech, whistles, higher frequency music. DBC is that low frequency rumbling noise, bass tones. Think of trains or heavy equipment operations. As Director Murphy relayed, on March 3rd, COGC staff set up our own sound survey equipment adjacent to Oxy's third-party sound equipment. You need to keep in mind that these two pieces of equipment are comparable in design and function and capability. The photo at the bottom shows the yellow box meter is COGCC sitting next to Oxy's third-party meter, and that's Collier's Hill in the distance. Setting that meter adjacent serves two functions. One, it verifies the accuracy of the third party's meter by comparison. And we do that because we don't have enough sound meters to set sound meters out for continuous monitoring. So many times we'll set the meter out, compare, make sure that the levels are about the same or the same. And then when we get noise complaints, we can request sound data from the operator and then use that to verify compliance. The other reason we set this here was we needed to set a point of compliance to determine readings at a distance. Next slide, please. Where am I at? So the chart on the left is COGCC's sound readings, and then the third-party readings are on the right. And as you can see, it's less than 1 dB difference. Ours was reading 69.8, and theirs is reading 68.9. The difference here may be attributed to the fact that the COGCC study was a bit longer. As you can see, it was taken from about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then the third parties was from 7 o'clock at night. So you're going to have a little bit more noise in that afternoon commute time. Next slide, please. So then we took and mapped the location of the complaints with given addresses, and that's why the address is important to us, the way we can actually map it out and see where it's at. The left image shows all of the locations that gave or filed complaints, and the one on the right is just a little bit closer in. As you can see, one of the complaints was quite a distance to the south. The one on the right shows you the pad and then the meter location, and then the more adjacent complaints. Next slide, please. So it's really important to note that using this formula does not take into account any attenuation or reduction in noise that may occur from buildings in between points, vegetation, topography, or weather conditions. In simple terms, it's a line of sight tool. When you plug in one number and distances, it just pulls out a calculated number. Staff felt that due to the density of the structures between the pad and the complaint residence, that this would give a better understanding of what the levels could be, and that because of the distance potential influences from other sources would be discounted. In other words, the farther away you get, the more of a chance you have of other sources affecting what's actually happening at that residence. So if we set that meter at the residence, we wouldn't necessarily be just reading what's coming from this one source, but from more sources. So using the formula, we entered in the 69.5 dBc, which was in our readings. Then you enter the distance from that source. So that's 470 feet. Our meter was set up 470 feet from the pad. Then we measure from the pad to the residence. As you enter that distance, the formula calculates the dB reading. And as you can see, all the calculated readings are below the 65 limit. Next slide, please. Finally, there's been some questions, and this is not a new question. We've had this over the years about COGCC using measurements taken by the public or local governments for use in corrective actions or enforcement. We do appreciate the effort taken to gather the data, and we do look at it and review it. However, it's difficult for us to use that data in taking action, as COGCC does not have control over the type, capability, maintenance, calibration, positioning, or operation of that equipment. Next slide, please. So with that, thank you, and I'll take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Leonard. So for our listening public, that was a example of the efforts taken by COGCC staff when it responds to complaints that it receives relative to noise. Appreciate you walking through that for us as commissioners and for our listening public. Looking around to see if any commissioners have any questions relevant to the presentation. All right, I'm not seeing any. Again, thank you very much. Thank you, Director Murphy, for the responsiveness to the town of Erie and the mayor's requests. We'll look forward to further discussion around the air emission monitoring request with the Canary. Again, thank you for all of that. With that, we'll just continue to roll through our agenda. At this point, we have a informational presentation. It's called Local Governments Informational Presentation Part 1. I'd like to introduce Commissioner John Messner, who has been instrumental in putting this together. John, if you wanted to introduce the folks that you have developed for this first informational presentation. I think this is really helpful. SB 181 did provide local governments with authority, additional authority, and express authority to regulate oil and gas. Our SB 181 rulemakings, it recognized the local authority that exists for local governments, and we tried to build into our rules instruments to allow for collaborative use of local and state authority. And so we look forward to this initial introduction by local governments. Commissioner Messner, if you wanted to make some introductions.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have today David Broadwell, General Counsel for the Colorado Municipal League, and Eric Bergman, Policy Director for Colorado Counties, Inc. Both have extensive expertise and knowledge in local government throughout the state of Colorado. They are part of organizations that represent either municipalities or counties throughout the state of Colorado, and I'm really excited that they are willing to come share their knowledge with the commission today. Like Director Robbins indicated, I think that the coordination and collaboration between the COGCC and local government is going to be an integral part of our success in implementing the rules that we've promulgated over the last few months. And so having a good base of knowledge around local government structure, I think, is going to be a really important part of that. And so with that, I'll introduce Mr. Bergman first, And Mr. Bergman, you, I think, should have the ability to share your screen. And welcome.
Great. Good morning, and thank you, John. And it's great to see everybody. I am not a, let's see here. Hang on, I'm just trying to find my, where to go. Hang on. I have done this before, I promise. Actually, let me escape out real fast. There we go. All right. Let me just try one more time here. There we go. All right. And one more thing. There we go. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. Apologize for the hiccup there. Again, good morning. My name is Eric Bergman. I'm the policy director here for CCI. And we're delighted to be able to talk to you for a few minutes today on kind of a 30,000 foot level on local governments in Colorado. I've been here about 11 years now. Before that, I was with Department of Local Affairs for 7 years. And then actually before that, I was here at CCI back in the 90s. And that's when I first met David Broadwell. And he's been a longtime friend and collaborator on a lot of issues over the years. And we're worked closely on many land use issues. I come at this. I'm actually the grandson of a county commissioner. My late grandfather, Bob Bergman, was a two-term county commissioner in Teller County up in the mountains back in the 80s. So I come by it honest. I will tell you that you guys have got I know you've got David Broadwell coming up next, and next week I believe next week you've got 3 other land use attorneys, David Baumgartner, Bruce Barker, and Barbara Green. And so those 3 plus David Broadwell, honestly, that's the Mount Rushmore of local government legal minds in Colorado. So you guys have got a fantastic couple of presentations set up. I wanted to do a quick overview today for my part of it on county history in Colorado, where we came from, some of the operating principles that we have. And then David's going to do his part on the municipal side. And then we wanted to have more of a dialogue with you all and take questions. Again, staying at kind of the 30,000 foot level, you guys are going to get a lot more into the weeds in the next presentation next week, I believe, or in weeks to come with those other attorneys. So our model of county government in Colorado is actually quite antiquated. We've had it here in the States for over 380 years. The word county actually comes from the old practice in English, in England, of having a count actually governing for the different governmental units over there. This English model of counties was brought over to America, first appeared in Virginia in 1634. When Colorado was established as a territory in 1861, we already had about 17 counties in Colorado that were governing. When we achieved statehood in 1876, it was up to 26, and today we have 64 counties. It's a very common unit of government across the U.S. In fact, all 50 states have some manner of county government. They don't always call them counties, but they are very common and universal, really. A little bit of fun trivia. Our word sheriff here, our county sheriff, that's actually derived from the term shire reeve. Back before the Norman Conquest in England, the unit of government was called the shire, and the reeve was the head of that unit of government. So actually, you can see that phrase, that term we use here in the States and in the U.S. has been around for literally over 1,000 years. So here's a map of Colorado when we first achieved statehood. Like I said, we had 24 counties at the time, and you can see how that number has tripled almost to where we are today with 64 counties. My association represents 61 of those 64 counties, and it's we provide advocacy at the General Assembly and research and education and a whole host of other services. Counties are actually constitutional subdivisions of state government, and we are literally arms of state government that were created to carry out the policies and programs. Now that has changed a lot since we achieved statehood, but and there are times when we are very much, appealing to state government that, hey, we are part of you, and there are times, quite frankly, when we're kind of like, I'm not with them, where we kind of assert our own our independence and are pushing forward on as a unique level of government apart from the state. But it's a strange kind of push-pull relationship that we have. This is really critical. Counties only possess those powers, have those authorities that are either expressly set forth or necessarily implied in state statute. This is in direct contrast to home rule municipalities, which are granted a much broader grant of authority in order, as far as rulemaking goes, as far as policy setting and decision making at the local level. For this reason, my association is regularly coming to the General Assembly with bills every year that are expanding county powers, asking for new expanded ways of governing and doing things that otherwise we would not be able to do. Again, there's another contrast with municipalities. At the county level, it's a deliberate decentralization of the responsibilities and the leadership. These are all the different county elected officials, and they are all independently elected and serve and are not part of the county commissioner world. We have budgetary authority over them, but we do not have direct oversight over them. So they all serve independently and carry out their own requirements and their statutory duties, but are not part of the board or underneath the Board of County Commissioners. This is just a very short list of some of the things that counties are responsible for doing. We conduct the elections, general elections every year. The property assessment and taxation is carried out through the counties. Human services and public health, law enforcement, public safety, maintain a courthouse and provide space for the district attorneys. Our county clerks have motor vehicle offices where they do license plates and vehicle registration, as well as running those elections. We're required to do road and bridge construction and maintenance in the unincorporated parts of the county. And then, of course, we have our land use responsibilities at the county level. That includes things like adopting a master or comprehensive plan, zoning and subdivision regulations, and then things like what we call 1034 and 1041 powers. Those are both references to House bills that were passed in the 70s. I believe you're all very familiar with 1041. That's the areas and activities of state interest legislation that gives us the ability to designate, it's an extended grant of authority at the local level, overall manner of new development, including oil and gas and other facilities like that. And it was a big part of that Senate Bill 181 conversation a couple of years ago. House Bill 1034 is one of the broadest grants of authority that's given to counties. It's the Local Control Land Use Enabling Act that was passed also in the 70s. And this one is a huge grant, very broad sweeping powers for counties on land use authority. I mentioned before that we only have those powers that are expressly set forth in statute. And this 1034 is one of the ones, well, we actually love it because it's very, not very specific, and it's almost vague sometimes, but that's a great for us because we can do a whole bunch of things that might otherwise be prohibited, but maybe aren't necessarily directly, specifically set forth in statute. So it's a very broad grant of authority there. Almost 50 of the, well, 3/4 or more of the counties in Colorado have either a county manager or a county administrator who's responsible for implementing the Board of Commissioners' policies and priorities. The duties will vary from county to county, but they generally kind of serve as a chief operating officer for the commissioners, It's not required to have one, but like I said, almost virtually all the counties do have a county administrator. And then of course, we've got a number of other staff that will work under that county manager. That includes county attorney, human services director, your road and bridge supervisor, public health director, and then your county land use administrator or planning director, depending on the county. I mentioned before, we've got the county commissioners are responsible for creating all the policy for the county, and they're also the ones that handle all the budgetary responsibilities. And that includes budgetary oversight for all the other departments, all the other elected officials. So that's really the only time we get to exert any authority over the other elected officials is in the area of the budget. And that does cause some dust ups from time to time, but it is that is the one area where the county commissioners do trump others. It's also the reason that we come back to the General Assembly a lot on things like unfunded mandates. It's one of the constant issues we have to deal with is the state putting more requirements on us, but not providing funding to carry out these new requirements. And so every year we're in a constant struggle trying to remind them that, if they're going to ask us to do additional things, they need to also provide the funding to do those things. Quick word on county revenues. This is one that's very much in contrast to the municipalities that David will talk about shortly. For counties, property tax revenue is the main revenue source, and that's usually about 2/3, depends on the county, but about 2/3 of our operating revenue comes from our property taxes in the county. This is in direct contrast, like I said, to the cities who are much more sales tax reliant to fund their operations. We do have sales tax authority, and I think about 2/3 or so of the counties in Colorado have some kind of sales tax, either a general sales tax. We've also got the ability to do taxes on marijuana now, and so that's one you'll see. Many of you might be familiar with this Wayfair decision at the Supreme Court a few years ago. This has been huge for us because of the especially the growth of online sales, and especially during COVID this last year, with everybody moving to stores closing and people buying online. That Wayfair decision opened the door for us to make sure we are getting our sales tax remitted to us from online sales, and that was a hugely important decision, especially like I said this last year when traditional stores were closing. We also
Mr.
obviously,
Bergman?
yeah, go ahead.
If I could, for our listening public, could you explain the Wayfair decision just a little bit more?
Sure.
Like
Well,
what
it
it did?
basically, yeah, absolutely. It just previous to the Wayfair decision, there was really no way for counties to realize or had to collect sales tax on online sales. So we were left out of that revenue trail before. And the Wayfair basically said that that set up a process, and then the State Department of Revenue then followed up, and there was legislation over the last few years that then basically set up a mechanism for us to start collecting sales tax on online sales and requiring retailers to collect and remit that to the state, and then it gets remitted to the counties. So it was like I said, it was a huge source of revenue we were missing out on for many years previous to this. And but we are now actually able to capture, and it's been, like I said, during COVID, it literally was a maybe saved a lot of counties from really going into the red, because it was with no stores presence anymore for several months there, and everybody buying online. We were able to actually saw increases in sales tax this last year, believe it or not, in many counties, which would otherwise have been just dismal sales tax returns based on the shutdowns and the stay-at-home orders that were in place.
Thank you.
Thank you. Also, obviously, we have a large number of fees that we collect at the local level in our clerk's office, during the land use department and stuff like that we get to retain. We're relying on, we get a large amount of state funding that comes to us. Highway User Tax Fund, the HUTF, we get a share back of that. There's a lot of pass-through on human services programs that we have to provide. And then obviously there's the severance tax that our energy counties it comes back to them in a direct distribution based on number of employees and factors like that. We're a number of grants that we receive from state and federal agencies. And then finally, we obviously are beneficiaries of a lot of federal funding that comes in things like PILT, payment in lieu of taxes, and the secure rural schools payments that come to us from Congress. And that's mine. I wanted to keep it short so we can make a lot of time for questions here. So with that, I'm gonna, if it's okay, I'll transition over to David Broadwell, and he'll do his piece, and then we can maybe take questions from the group if that's okay.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Bergman. Really appreciate your being with us and the presentation. I think we'll hold on questions and we'll pepper you both after Mr. Broadwell's done. Welcome, Mr. Broadwell.
Morning, everybody. Let me share my screen if I can. Do we have permission?
Yes, I believe so.
You do, Mr. Broadwell.
Can everybody see this?
No, we don't see anything
I
yet.
cannot see it.
I clicked share screen. I'll go backwards.